I think the most important thing about, what we did before we recorded this first album was that we'd spent almost 2 years designing the sound of the band. Because even though it wasn't all that long a time between Simon joining the band, I think in May or June, and us actually going into the studios to record the album 6 months later, Roger, Nick, and I had been playing together for about 18 months, I think. So we'd been really working on, we knew what we wanted the band to sound like. Andy was easy. He just slipped in. He knew exactly what to play from day one. So, it was like an overnight sensation that we'd been working on for almost 2 years.
Uh, we had to be honest with you. We've done a lot of demos and stuff. We did the work with Bob Lamb, who was very professional in his approach. Actually, I mean, he approached it like a real, like a very high level producer. So he was pretty fussy about what we were playing and what we were putting down. So he kind of prepped us really for when we got into the big studios. But I remember being in a studio probably from the age of 16, 17 with different bands putting demos down and whatever. So I had some experience.
Yeah, I remember moving to London and starting to work in London a lot, going into the studio in London, that being quite challenging. Not because the studio was extra challenging, but just being away from home for the first time was quite challenging. And, this was, for me, I was starting to learn, as a bass player, in the studio, how much time I had on my hands, and it was very quick and easy to get the bass down. And then I have a lot of time on my hands in London while the rest of the guys were doing overdubs.
Just look at the Wikipedia of this record, and it was recorded over December 1980 and January 1981. I thought, wow, was it that quick? Did we do an album that quickly? I mean, looking at that now, that was quite a feat, wasn't it, to do so quickly?
The first thing we did, we went in and we recorded Planet Earth and Late Bar. That I remember, so that we had a single to go. And then we went back and picked up to record the rest of the songs. We were on the road supporting Planet Earth in February, but I think we went back to the studio after that tour.
Yeah,
and finished.
Yeah, I can't imagine that it actually happened that quickly. I mean, it was quick, but I don't think it was that quick. So somebody needs to update the Wikipedia and say that we went back in February. Okay.
Well, the fundamental difference with the first album and how it differs from every other album is that really all the songs were written. The only thing that was created in the studio was Tel Aviv, but even that was based on something that we'd had knocking around for a few years. So, everybody knew their parts. It was just a matter of recording it. There was no writing it. Today, and really, I mean, you could say almost every album since the first album, we kind of wrote. I mean, Rio, we did have demos for most of Rio before we went into the studio, but the first album, every part was written before we started recording.
After Rio, once we got to Seven and the Ragged Tiger, that's when we started really changing stuff in the studio. The first two records, I recall that they went down and, I put the drums down to a song, and that song would pretty well stay like that. It was only when we got to the third record that by the end of the album, the drums would be to, the top song that would have developed into something completely different.
We were connected with Colin Thurston through Dave Ambrose. Dave Ambrose was our A&R man at EMI. Something that we'd done that we were able to do because we had managers that had a few bob, as they say, was that we went on the road with Hazel O'Connor, which was, an opportunity for us. We did about 12 shows with her, and they were theatre shows. So every show was a showcase, and we were getting record labels coming to Birmingham, coming to see us in London, coming around the country. and getting to see us play on a decent sized stage with a decent sized lighting rig and sound. And really, by the time we got to the end of that tour, we had a deal. And Dave Ambrose brought Colin Thurston to meet us. He came to see us play, and we were really turned on by Colin because he'd been in the Bowie Berlin sessions. He'd engineered those sessions for The Idiot and Heroes, and so he was like very special. And he was also producing a lot of younger artists like Bow Wow Wow and Human League. So he was hip to, like, he knew just how to handle us. He was marvelous.
He was amazing. He was really gave you so much affirmation, which I don't recall that I particularly had that before that. I mean, Bob Lamb, he was like that, to be honest, as well. But Colin was just like, he made you feel that you were great, and he made you feel that you could really play well. And he spent a lot of time with us individually, and we spent a lot of time with him because he was great with drum sound. I mean, drum sound was just out of this world. When you're in the studio, Red Bus with the big speakers there, and Colin would play down the track. I mean, it was mind blowing. I've never heard anything like it before.
Well, Bob Lamb had achieved a level of fame in Birmingham by producing UB40's first album in his home studio. So going to record at Bob Lamb's, was like a thing. I mean, there was a very strong scene of bands in Birmingham that we were a part of. So there was a level of competition, and we weren't the only ones. We were seeing a lot of bands were coming up, and going to Bob Lamb's was like finishing school. Everybody did it at some point or another. And and Bob had attained a certain level of gravitas, in some part by being in a band that had a record deal, gone on the road in America. I mean, a funny anecdote about Bob Lamb is that, Bob had been the drummer in a band called the Steve Gibbons Band, who were like always Birmingham's, they were gonna be, and they were never really all that. I think they made it to Top of the Pops, but the Who loved them and took them on tour in America. So when we got to Bob Lamb's for the first time, Bob Lamb had flight cases. We'd never seen flight cases before. I mean, we always carried our own equipment up the steps. I mean, up the stairs to wherever we were playing. I mean, you just carried the drums. But Bob had these custom built cases, these boxes on wheels that the drums would all slot into. And we actually bought a couple of them from him, and they were our first flight cases. Crossed out Steve Gibbons.
I remember those, yeah.
Duran Duran, yeah.
He'd actually bought them. They still had the Who on, because I think they'd toured with the Who. And as I recall, they kind of gaffer taped over the Who and put Steve Gibbons Band on the flight cases. So that was even cooler, that these flight cases had been part of the Who's touring rig. So that's right. That was quite a big moment, seeing the flight cases.
Bob had some special ideas about how to make things work, and he was very clever at getting a big sound. We were still looking at sort of 4-track, 8-track recording with Bob Lamb, and he was very good at getting the sound condensed onto the tape. And I mean, when Roger and I were listening recently to the first demos that we did with Bob, and they were pretty remarkable, quite honestly. I mean, the fact that Roger and I think have been playing as a rhythm section together for a couple of months, they're pretty remarkable, that we're playing as tight as we are. I think Bob had a big part in that, really. But, when you're 18, we're like 18, 19, we're playing every day. It's not like today.
Well, you're like a sponge as well, aren't you, JT? I just think you learn so quickly. You're learning on an hourly, on a daily basis. And I think you learn so much on those Bob Lamb sessions. So, I mean, a big shout out to Bob, because he was really, so important in those initial formulative days that, when we arrived to record the first album, you kind of prepped us, you kind of trained us, and you had us studio ready.
I'm always, you know, I always tell like new art, anybody that's trying to make a go of it in this business, you know, how big a team of people you need, you know, and you, I mean, what was that Hillary Clinton book? It takes a village. I mean, it takes a town to build an artist. You know, we didn't even know it at the time, but people like Bob Lamb, Colin Thurston were major mentors to us. I can't imagine us getting where we got to, you know, by the summer of '81, you know, without those two guys. And there were a lot of others as well, but those two were our principal teachers of the studio arts in the early years.
I think it was a great moment, and I think it was. I don't think we had that amount of expectation. I don't think. You know, so when that happened, it was huge for us. I mean, Planet Earth had done well. Careless Memories didn't do as well. And you know, there was a point I think we maybe thought, you know, was that it? Was Planet Earth it? Maybe that's the end of the career, or you know, we're going to go back to the day jobs or whatever. But thankfully, Girls on Film did a lot better, and which was great because John and I had just been on our first ever holiday together. We took our girlfriends with us to Crete in the Greek islands, and we left Birmingham, mainly thinking that, you know, that was it. Careless Memories had not done great, and we started to get messages when we got back saying Girls on Film was, you know, they entered the chart. I don't know where it entered, but it was doing a lot better, and we were going to get top of the pops. And we came back, and we pretty well, we went straight down to London, to top of the pops, and you can see on that recording actually we're looking pretty suntan because we've just come back from the first boys' holiday, and that was a great moment because we thought, wow, it's happening again.
We definitely had a sense that we were appealing to teenage girls by the time the album came out. I think one of the major sort of changes that happened, I would say, between February and June of that year was that we started getting a lot of press in the girls' magazines and a lot of covers on magazines like Jackie and My Guy, and you know, and I think that, you know, if the music papers had been a little more, I mean, the NME, like, which was our Bible, really. I mean, I remember being terribly disappointed that the NME didn't get on board. They just took an anti-Duran stance from day one. So we weren't going to get, you know, the alternative. Yeah. So, you know, but we started getting, you know, we were getting smash hits, you know, and Music Star, those kinds of magazines. But then when the girly thing started happening, and we started getting fan mail, you know, that was the critical thing. And so by the time, you know, Girls on Film came out, we went back on the road in the summer, and suddenly, you know, our audiences had changed enormously. You know, it had, like, up until, you know, on that first tour in earlier in the year, our audiences kind of looked like the guys in the Planet Earth video. You know, everybody looked like a New Romantic. But by the time we went back out on the road and started doing sold out theaters, you know, it was mostly screaming girls. So, you know, the album came out around about then. We knew there was an audience for it.
We didn't love ourselves so very much, so it was nice.
I mean, the thing about that moment, that era, you know, was we had been seeing, you know, really from punk rock, which was like end of '76, for 3 years, we'd seen bands grow and explode in front of our very eyes. You know, we knew there was a path to, I mean, I don't even like to say fame and stardom, but there was a path to success. You know, it wasn't an anomaly. I mean, thousands of kids were doing it all around England and Scotland. You know, and Ireland. They were getting together, writing songs, playing gigs, getting better, getting deals, getting on TV, having hits. You know,
I think also Birmingham Birmingham was, at that time, was a place where you thought you could make it from. You know,
Hot.
Yeah, it was
It was
hot. You know,
hot. Yeah.
the beat had just become big. You had Dexys that were becoming a big band. Not that we wanted to
No, but
follow the kind of
it was
music that they were
important. But it was
playing, but we
important.
definitely
UB40.
UB40, yeah. So there's definitely a feeling that you could. It was a way out of Birmingham via music, and Fashion as well. That was another band that was creating a lot of heat. So when I saw you guys at Barbarella's, I'd gone to see Fashion, and you guys came on first, and I thought, wow, you know, maybe this is the band that's going to be the next big thing. And I
That
went
was the
home and I
Stephen
never
Duffy
really
band.
thought much. What's that?
That was the Stephen Duffy band.
That's right, yeah. And I went home and I never really gave it much thought. Then a few weeks later, it was actually Andy Wickett, I think, that called me at home. And he just joined Duran Duran. He said, oh, well, they're looking for a drummer. So I thought, wow, it's that band that I've seen at Barbarella. So there was definitely a feeling, as you say, that there was a way out.
You know, an anecdote that says a lot about how things were back then. I'll never forget being at a wine bar. These were the days of the wine bars. But I was at a wine bar. I think it was probably around Christmas '80, and talking to then George O'Dowd and telling George the name of our band, Duran Duran, and George saying, "Duran Duran, are they still going?" I mean, we were knocking around Birmingham for quite a while with different singers and different kind of, getting it all, getting it all together. It took us a long time to get it together, but we just,
yeah, I mean, the optimism was definitely balanced by cynicism, and it's quite a cynical city, I think. Birmingham, there was quite a lot of cynicism around. And I remember we played at the Rum Run the first time, and this girl that I'd known for quite a long time came up and she said, oh, so what do you think? Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible. That band's going nowhere. It's going nowhere. I said, no, trust me. We're going to get better. We're going to get somewhere. Oh, no way. So, there was definitely an underbelly of cynicism, I would say, around as well.
I think it's interesting that, with the sort of the direction that we set for ourselves, because we were listening to, you and I particularly, we're listening to disco coming from America, and we were listening to, the Euro disco of Moroder, and we had to form a very, very professional sound. It wasn't slacker music. There was a lot of bands getting away with pretty sloppy kind of stuff. We had to attain a pretty high level of kind of tightness. And given that, I mean, you'd been playing music a long time, compared to me, but we came together and learned quite quickly. And with Nick as well, and Nick learning how to program these, set off these sequences, we got a pretty high level of musicianship together quite quickly, I think. It couldn't have worked any other way. You couldn't have played something like Planet Earth in a sloppy way. It had to be played super tight and on the clock, and that's something that we were doing that not a lot of other bands were doing at the time.
I think we wanted to get a gig. That we didn't. I mean, I certainly didn't think, we've got to make it in Australia or the US and whatever. It was just to get the next gig, really. I don't think personally, I never really looked much further than the end of my nose at that point in my life, and it was just kind of doing the best you can and just kind of go wherever it moves. I think. Got to give some credit to the managers that we had at that point, because they'd just come back from New York. They'd been hanging out at Studio 54, and they had it in their mind that we should break the US. It was one of their kind of visions from very early on. I remember just kind of going with it. Okay, yeah, let's give it a go. not really probably having much hope that we can actually break in the way that we did. But it would just kind of just go with it, show up every day, and play as well as you can and see where it takes you.
I had a lot of drive to succeed around the world. I mean, you know, I mean, you know, I wasn't kidding. You know, I had a plan. You know,
yeah,
and that was like
well, you and Nick particularly, you and Nick really had a plan, didn't you, as well?
Yeah, and you know, I think it was just informed by, you know, just watching the, you know, looking at the. I was obsessed by the New Musical Express. I read that cover to cover every week. So I watched what happened when artists went to America and when they, you know, and it was like, I mean, Nick and I would joke that it was like this, it was like a game almost, you know, you throw a 6, you get on top of the pops, you know, you throw, you know, I mean, you know, I was talking recently to a friend about Rod Stewart and how Maggie May, when it came out, it was extraordinary. Maggie May was #1 in the UK and the US simultaneously, and Every Picture Tells a Story was the #1 album in the UK and the US simultaneously. Now in my house, that was news. You know, that was like an amazing thing that he pulled off. So I was always aware that that was something that could be done, you know, and that, you know, and artists went to New York and they played this place called Madison Square Gardens. I had no idea what it was. For all I was concerned, it could have been a garden, like the Winter Gardens in Bournemouth. I had no idea what it was like, but I wanted to play there, and I felt that we could play there. And so, you know, I don't know. I just thought that the steps were there. You know, if you would just take them. First album, that, you know, if I'm going to play the first album, I'm going to play the version with To the Shore. And, you know, I don't like that photograph on the front because I'm right at the back. I don't know how that happened, but but other than, you know, the second album is a bit of the second version of the album is a bit of a kind of a, I don't know, what is it, Rog? It was exploitative almost.
The first creative thought is often the best thought, and I think the first version of the record was obviously the first creative thought. That was the right way to do it, I think. And I think once you start kind of fiddling with things afterwards and trying to put different songs in with a collection of music that already works together, and artwork that already works, I think it's probably the wrong path, I think. So I would prefer the original.
I would say to myself at the time, fasten your safety belt. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
I was gonna say exactly the same thing.
Good evening. Welcome to Top of the Box. On the program tonight, Phil Collins, The Who, Motorhead, and Adam and Eve. And spinning like an apple just outside the top 40. There we go. Duran Duran, who took their name from the professor in the film Barbarella.